there and send the Nigerian Boy Scouts to police the area where the African Muslims were staying. So we need to stop and take the blinders off of our eyes, that there's an anti-African culture that pervades the governmental behavior, especially at the police level structure, in all non-African countries, because all of them are engaged in stealing the wealth of Africa, and all of them are engaged in using the brains of Africans in the diaspora, but don't want them to come together to enjoy the wealth of Africa for themselves, or to use those brains to build African institution and industry for themselves. And that does produce at the most local level and at the level of the white individual, hatred and this attitude we call racism. And if you ask one of them to justify, say, well, why do you hate the Africans? Why do you have this racist view? You enslaved the Africans, but you are angry with them. They should be angry with you. You are the enslaver. You colonized me, but you're angry with me. I should be angry with you. It makes no logical sense except to justify the behavior of misusing the talents and the wealth and the resources of Africa to build Europe and European institutions across the world to sustain it and maintain it. That habit of behavior have become a culture, an anti-African culture. And it is that anti-African culture that we are calling racism. But racism is just one level of manifestation of the anti-African culture that pervades all Western and Asian and Middle Eastern capitals, all of them. And Africans need to stop pretending we only have one another. We only have the 54 nations in Africa, the diaspora in Europe, the Caribbean, Latin, and English and French-speaking Africans, and Brazil, and Colombia, and the other Spanish and Portuguese-speaking African nations. That's who we have. We don't have any other friends culturally, or intellectually, or politically, or militaristically, anywhere else in the world. And so that gets manifested in America, that if I see a Black man, I don't have to say, excuse me, sir, your light on your car is broken or your license plate is missing. Do you have your driver's license? I walk up to the car and say that to a white man or a white woman. But when I walk up as a policeman to the car of a Black man, I said, get out, get on the ground, hands in the air. And if you move too slow, you're a dead person. And we see it over and over, week after week, month after month, year after year, and we're still referring to it as racism. It's deeper than that. It is an anti-African culture that has festered and been bred into so-called Western civilization for hundreds of years. And it has been bred into that civilization so that they can rationalize and justify the robbery of Africa and her resources, and the robbery of the talents and the intellect of the African persons, especially in the diaspora, without anyone saying anything. I think it was some man, where is he? I'd like to see, oh, I don't know what I did with it. But it was some British soldier or diplomat in 1863. Yeah, and I'm going to read this. He said, I've traveled across the length. He's talking about Africa, right? I've traveled across the length of the breadth of Africa, and I've not seen one person who's a beggar, who's a thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture. For if the African thinks that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated people. Lord Macaulay's address to the British Parliament, 2nd February 1835. Well, they've carried out that policy. They've enforced that policy. The Brits have, the French have, the Italians have, the Spanish have, to this day. And that's what you see manifesting in the shootings of Blacks in America. If you try to see it separate from the rest of Africa, you won't understand what's going on. I think Dr. Francis Welsing says if you fail to understand the true nature of racism and white supremacy, everything else you think you know will only serve to confuse you. And you cannot understand white supremacy and racism unless you understand its relationship to Africa itself and African peoples worldwide. And we're afraid to make the connections because we're afraid of our enemy. They've instilled this fear in us. You know, if I criticize someone from Nigeria, they won't, even our own people don't say, oh, he's criticizing his own people himself. They would say that Black American is criticizing the Nigerian. The Nigerian is the same African I am. I look like any man from Calabar or anywhere down there. My people come from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, from Ghana. So, you know, I have some native people, but those native people that lived on the East Coast of America, they came from Africa before Columbus. I know my people, I know my history, I know my blood, I know my genes. And I didn't show up on the scene last week, people. I've been trying to talk to you, my people, for nearly 60 years without taking a day off from work. Nearly 60 years. Okay. So I'm trying to say something significant. The killings in America that we see has little to do with the Black America and more to do with the Black African in a larger scheme of things. The Africans in America, just the ones that are descendant of the formerly enslaved, is producing an disposable capital of over $1.7 trillion a year. What if we can tie just that into some African industries on the country? We have 100+ Black colleges, separate from all the thousands of white colleges that we attend. But all of the high-tech things they've bought with what they've stolen from the resources of Africa. What if we could use those people we trained to send home to help sort of integrate with our own engineers and scientists and doctors that's already on the ground every year? What if we could do what Israel does in building a nation by utilizing its diaspora and the technology and the wealth that diaspora brings with it? Well, no one wants to see that. So you keep people living in fear and terror and disruption and psychosocial and cultural dislocation from one another. And you can rule over them. We just lost President of Chad. And I was reading up on the history of Chad, the most recent, because I've always been up on Chad. I have a special relationship with Chad. And when the oil was discovered in Chad, and they discovered it a long time ago, but when they decided to explore it and build a pipeline to Cameroon, the World Bank stepped in and said, okay, we'll put up the money to have you do this, but all the revenue that you get from your oil must be placed in Citibank in London.